Uh-oh. Look at that. Voltage is still there. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go to the relays next, pull up the wiring diagrams, and we'll continue from there. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Toyota Previa adventure. I'm not sure how many parts this is going to be yet, but here's what we're doing today. Obviously we've got a lot of snow here. I cleared this off the other day. We've had over a foot of snow and it has just been crazy. So here's what's going on today. I left off with a teaser about the stereo and what was going on with that system. And so we're going to go ahead and fix that up today. I've been waiting for parts. Been waiting for parts forever and they just haven't come. I mean, the snow has blocked off most of the passes and everything, so it's just been a total nightmare. So I'm gonna go into the car, pull out the stereo, set it down on the counter, and then we'll catch up with everything that's going on and let you know what's going on. Catch you guys up really quick on what happened at the end of part 1. Got a little long-winded. So I waited for the new door handle. This is the old one here, and here's the new one. And I didn't do my research. So bit me in the butt on that one, but you notice those are not the same latching mechanisms. This handle's for a 92, even though the seller said that it was a 91. I got a used one because it came with a new lock cylinder. And so what I ended up doing was the lock cylinder kind of exploded. You can see the plastic casing is gone on this. The structural integrity is terrible. I'm pretty sure this is already an aftermarket handle. So this one feels much, much, much better. But the problem is it doesn't fit the car. So I went ahead and I pulled the new lock cylinder out of the new door handle, well, new, and I went ahead and I took apart the internals, watched a few lock picking lawyer videos, kind of figured out how that works. I went ahead and I picked the lock, the new one and the old one. The old one kind of fell apart, but I pulled out all these pins and I have re-keyed the cylinder to the key. So now the key actually turns the cylinders. So this will be a fully functional lock on the new door handle, which should be coming tomorrow. So I'll have an update on that tomorrow. So here is the stereo unit that I soldered up last time. And that was quite an adventure. And I'm gonna have to redo all of this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and chop them all off and try again. And I'm not gonna make you watch the video because that would take forever and be ridiculous. Here we are at the spaceship. I'm gonna jump this thing, get the heat going in it, and we'll put this back in. Well, that's it. I did it. And I will update you once we get door handle and other such things. So that will be tomorrow. It's cold. I'm going in. All right, here we are. We're gonna troubleshoot something new, and then we'll troubleshoot something newer after that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to this. I'll show you what's going on here. Let's get focus right there. So this cable right here. So you can see there's some slack on it right now. There should be no slack on that. That should be tight at all times. And so as we pull the throttle cable, right, that should also move. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out. And I'm gonna get some lube and we'll shoot it down there and see what happens. All right, so I've been at this for about, I don't know, 7-10 minutes now, and this is where we're at. It's retained some of its spring, and I got some lube down there and flushed out a bunch of crud. So it's still not perfect. I'm probably going to go for another 5 minutes and then hook it back up. But this should be significantly better than it was. So, all right. So this is where we're at now. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. So, cable snaps back nice and quick. It's exactly what we needed it to do. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this all up, and then we'll move on to the big issue of problem number 2. Okay, so here we are in the car, and in the last video clip you watched me install the stereo, and that was interesting. So the install went great, all the speakers worked, everything did what it was supposed to do, but, we had a problem. The problem is this, that after I shut the key off, I turned the camera off, I shut the key off, and the stereo stayed on. And I thought, wow, that's kind of unusual. So I started doing some thinking, and I have the diagram for the radio and the connectors and everything. And I've seen on radios before where if you don't connect the ground right, the stereo will stay on, the head unit will stay on. But this was doing this kind of weird power cycle thing. So I did some research, and here's what I wanted to show you. So right now the car is running, and here's what we got. Let me set you up in a way that you'll be able to see this. Think for a second here. Okay, that's going to be really dark, but I hope you can see. So right here I've got the connector, we've got wires to the connector. So I'm going to go ahead and take my multimeter, and I'll set this up so that maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. I'd love to set this up right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my black on the ground and my yellow on this yellow wire right here. And we're reading 14.25 volts, which is excellent. That means the battery's charging. This battery has been really low, and there have been some issues, and it's just been sitting. So this is charging right now, which is why I've got the car running. So the black is our ground, and I know that for a fact, and the yellow is our battery voltage, our system voltage, right? So the next pin is this red one here, and so how this works is this is also system voltage. There's a 2-power system here. On the yellow wire, it is a constant 14 volts, no matter if the car is running or not. So this is constant. Now this red wire here, this is a switched power. So when the car is running, the 12 volts is there telling the stereo to turn on, and when the car is not running, that 12 volts goes away. Okay, so what happens is when the key shuts off and the key goes to the lock position and the key is removed from the cylinder, the 12 volts on the yellow wire, which you can't see, the exposure, come on, let's see if it can fix it. The system voltage on the yellow wire stays there, and the system voltage on the red wire switches to 0. So let's go ahead and test that. Let me grab my pins here, and I'll put my ground in. Okay, I'll put my power in. Okay, we are currently reading 14.2.3 volts. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off. Okay, key is off. We're sitting at 0.625, 26, 27. This will go all the way up to 0.667 volts on this red wire. And I really hope you can see that. Otherwise, you're just going to have to take my word for it. So the problem is, that is just enough voltage to turn on the stereo. The stereo turns on, it pulls this voltage down, and then the stereo shuts off, but then the voltage comes back. And so it's this whole looping cycle of the stereo kicking on and off, on and off, on and off. So we're back up to system voltage here. So what I need to do is figure out a way to get this voltage to drop. And what I did was I back probed this red wire with the key off, and I pulled the voltage down through a test light, and that shut the stereo off. So I got to thinking, well, what else is switched power? Well, we have our cigarette lighter right down here, okay? And not this, but these connectors down here. And one of those pins is switched power, and the other one's a constant ground. So this top pin right here is switched power. So I'm gonna go ahead and chase this wiring diagram, and I think what we're gonna find, this is an assumption, I guess, you know, we're gonna have to prove this. My guess is that this ignition switch here is not releasing the contact all the way, and we are perceiving extra voltage on our system here. So the next step is going to be for me to pull this knee panel, it's really not that bad. There's some screws on the bottom and then just some clips on the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll get back to you. All right, so here's the plan. I am going to measure voltage here at this connector. I'm going to shut the key off, measure the voltage, and I have the column down here. It's just pretty easy, it's just 2 screws. And so you're going to pull down this under trim panel to get to this connector right here. So this connector goes to a bunch of things, but most importantly it goes to this ignition switch. And when I pull this connector, we're going to see if that voltage stays. If it does stay, the next thing we're going to go to is the relay that controls the system. We're going to see what's going on. I've got some wiring diagrams that I can look at after this. And so we're going to pull that and we'll see what happens. I'll update you once we get there. Uh-oh. Look at that. Voltage is still there. Okay. So I'm going to have to go to the relays next, pull up the wiring diagrams, and we'll continue from there. Here we go. Here's what I've discovered. So we have one end of our meter on ground here, and we have our other lead here. So when we test this pin, we have 0.650. I'm checking this wiring diagram here. Let's take a look at what this says. We're gonna go to the power distribution. Sorry, that is the power distribution. Okay, so we have our battery coming in here. We've got our fuse box, and then this comes out on this white wire, this thick white wire, into our ignition switch. And it also comes in here on this white with red, right here on this 20 amp fuse. So what's happening is this wire here, which is blue with red, I hope you can see this. This wire here, blue with red, powers up our 7.5 amp radio and our 15 amp cigarette lighter fuse. If I pull either of those, this is the cigarette lighter fuse here, and our 7.5 amp is right there. If I pull either of those, our draw goes to 0. But if I unplug our ignition switch, the draw does not go to 0, and I just showed you that. So what I did was I checked this voltage. After unplugging our ignition switch, I checked the voltage on this blue with red wire, and if I go down there and I find the pin, there's our draw. 0.650, 0.650. So, what does that mean? Well, what I need to do is figure out if this is the only feed for this wire. It should be, and if it is, my hypothesis is that somewhere along this line, there is a short to power on here, somewhere. Or something is backfeeding the circuit. So I need to figure out exactly all what's on this. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to get access to the all data. So I will do that, and we'll come back once we figure that out. All right, so here's what I found. We're on the all data here, and on this, which one is it? One of these diagrams. Maybe it's one of the ones. It's one of the ones I already got pulled up. Okay, so this is also from all data. This connector here, I'm looking for I111, which feeds the 7.5 amp radio fuse and the 15 amp cigarette lighter fuse. When I pull both of those, the voltage goes down to 0. So what I'm going to do is look for that connector. Now I went to all data here, not that one, here, and I started looking at the connectors. Bam, here we go. So you can look here, and right here we have II1, which is way down there, and that is the closest looking connector that I can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shine my light down into this hole here, and I'm going to follow this harness until we get to a connector. I'm going to split the circuit in half, and then that should help us figure out where we're going, right? That's what Eric OL says. He says split the circuit in half. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So somewhere between that white connector there and somewhere else in this system is feeding voltage. So let's figure that out. All right, so I thought of a test that I can do without pulling everything apart and losing my mind, because tracing down these harnesses is not as easy as I hoped it would be. So here's our fuse block up here for the inside, and there are two fuses that we can observe the draw on. Let me grab my meter here. Okay, so the first one, I'm gonna have to put this up here so you can see it. Get everything set up for you. We're gonna, sorry, I gotta back probe the bottom here. Okay, so we've got a good ground. So the first fuse right here that we can observe it on is this 7.5, which is the radio fuse. There it is on one side, there it is on the other side. Okay, the second fuse is this 15 amp cigarette lighter right here. Focus. Okay, so there's one side, the draw is there. You're just gonna have to trust me. There's the other side, the draw is there. Okay, so here's a cool test. Let's go ahead and pull the 7.5 amp stereo fuse, and let's see what side of the fuse is still on. Okay, so here's the outgoing side, nothing. The ingoing side, aha, there's the draw. Okay, so we know that the draw is on the right side of this fuse. Now, while leaving that pulled out, let's go over here to this 15 amp, okay? Bam, we're gonna pull that. I'm gonna take my tester, let's test this side. There's the draw. No draw. No draw. Bam. Okay, so we know that on this side of the cigarette lighter is the draw, without a doubt. So we know that it's on this side of the fuse, so let's go to the diagram for the cigarette lighter. Okay, so the cigarette lighter shares this power from the red with blue with red wire at the ignition. Okay, so my guess is something is backfeeding from this cigarette to this 7.5 amp. We can test that by going down here to the connector. Once I replace my ground, come on. Okay, so I'm gonna go back down here to this connector where we saw the draw originally. It's not there. And if I put that fuse back in, I'm gonna leave that pin there. I'm gonna put this fuse back in, and we just watch that draw come right back. So that is excellent. So what does that mean? That means that between our block up here, so actually that means this. From here to the cigarette lighter, we are getting a voltage somewhere. So something in the cigarette lighter is backfeeding. Okay, check it out. So I've got the fuse pulled up there. We've got our draw up there. We know that for a fact. Now, I've got my ground pin right there. I'm gonna take my probe here and I'm gonna stick this into the power side of this cigarette lighter. Uh-oh. 0.665 volts. So what does that tell us? There is some sort of short between here and there. And we are getting an extra half a volt from somewhere. So what are my options realistically? I would love to take that out, run a new wire down to there, bypass the whole thing, and call it a day. Now, I could depin that and do that as a proof of concept. That would be a good idea. I would love to also follow this harness all the way back to wherever it comes from, but there is so much stuff. There is so much stuff. I could not, for the life of me, through all data, find out the best place to split the circuit in half. So I pulled both of these fuses. And checked, and one pin over here had the 0.667 or 0.7 when the car is running volt draw on it. So what that tells us is that it's not a power side issue. There is some sort of backfeed or short to power in the system somewhere. So the next immediate spot that I went was down below. I back probed the wire, and so it comes in on a blue with red. I'll show you on the wiring diagram. It comes in on a blue with red in the back, and it leaves on a white, which according to the wiring diagram is a green, but it's actually a white in this car. So it leaves on the white and it goes into this giant harness way back in there. You can kind of see it right in there. And it's a total pain in the butt to get to. And I followed that down, I did a bunch of research, and I did some more testing. And I was thinking, well, maybe I can just run a wire to the cigarette lighter and get that to work. Well, problem number one with that theory right there. Problem number one with that theory is that there are other things on the circuit other than just the cigarette lighter. And I know this because I looked at the wiring diagrams, and there's some sort of airbag system on the circuit, and the power mirrors are also on the circuit. So what did I do? I unplugged the switch. So I unplugged the switch and I started taking a look at that. My multimeter just turned off. I started taking a look at all those pins. So I tested all these pins and I found the draw on this bottom pin right here, and I will show that to you. Okay. All right, so here's my connector. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in this bottom pin here. Come on. This is so hard to do one-handed. You YouTubers are talented. Okay. All right, so that's in. And I'm missing my ground, of course. So I gotta get that back in over here. Pow. Okay, here it is. 0.669 right now with the car running. So, what's the next step? Well, our draw, sorry, I'm fiddling around with my ground here. So our draw is up there and it's also down here. So what does that tell us? That tells us that somewhere in between those 2 points is our problem, okay? So I'm trying to find a connector. I found a connector called BJ1, and block junction 1, I'm not sure, but it is the connection that follows the door flex inside the car in this hole, and is right below here, right below this tweeter. So in order to get to it, you have to pull the ductwork, you got to pull this trim panel, and you got to pull this lower column, and there's 2 connectors down there. And as let me see if I can get you in here. Okay, come on. I'm seeing the unplugged connector. There it is. See that one that's plugged up right there? That's plugged in? That is BJ1. And somewhere on there is a red with white wire that comes out of that. So, what does that tell us? I unplugged that connector and I am going to show you something miraculous. All right, so let me set up our draw up here. Okay, we are on the right, we're on the right wire there. I'm gonna take my ground, I'm gonna set the meter up here. I'm gonna take my ground and I'm gonna set my ground up right here. Okay. Okay, here we are. 0.669. Bam. Proof. There we go. So that is on this tiny little wire, right? Probably can't see it. Right here. Boink. Hello. So that wire comes out, goes into that huge mess, comes down and around. So I came over here, and as soon as I started pulling all of this trim over here, I noticed something really interesting, and it's that, uh-oh, it's wet. Focus, come on, right here. Uh-oh, it's wet. See that? I followed that up into here. I'm gonna point you at a place where you can see this, hopefully. Sorry, this is, I work in Hollywood, I wish I did. Sometimes. Okay. Let's get you so you can see it. Okay, you can see that connector right up there. I'm gonna squeeze my hand back up in here. And, okay. There's a tab on the back. And you gotta push up a little bit to release the pressure. And pull that tab down. Okay. There's our connector. We just lost dome lights, okay? We just lost the dome lights, but look at the meter. 29 millivolts, 30 millivolts. That's acceptable. I did it. Okay, so what does this mean? So there's the white wire coming in, and there is the red with white coming out. So you might think, oh, well, obviously the short is occurring over here. So I put my meter on here. I will prove that to you. Here's my test lead. Come on. Okay, here's my test. Okay, it's in the hole. It's in the pin. Here's my meter. 20 millivolts, 30 millivolts. So, there's no short here. There's no short from that connector back. What does that mean? That means the short is inside that connector. That is crazy. And you know what's even worse? I don't see a single green crusty. I am not seeing any issues at all. Come on, camera, adjust. Okay, hold on. Boop. It's too bright. Let me dim my light here. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see that. I hope you can. There is zero corrosion in that, but there is water in that connector, and that water is shorting out that connector. All right, everybody, quick update. I was wrong, and I have never been so happy to be wrong. So here's what I was thinking. I thought green crusties in the connector. Uh-oh, not good. There's wetness down there, right? Well, I inspect, there's no green crusties. I brush everything out, clean it off, spray some fluid in there. Everything works pretty well. Pin fitment seems really good. Everything seems great. So I go check the diagrams again. I'm like, what in the world? I thought that was BJ1. Well, turns out I was wrong. That is, what do they call it? I4 or something like that. I'll put a screenshot of the wiring diagram up on the screen, and I'll circle it, and it will make so much more sense. So that connector goes to here in the door, here in the dash, and follows up this pillar, up and around to, uh-oh, the clock. It's the clock. So I have unplugged, so here, I lost my ground here. So let me go ahead and get my ground again. It's not the most reliable, but you know what? It's gonna work for this project, so. Till I can buy a power probe extension. There's the draw. 6.657 volts. Are you ready for this? Here it is. I'm gonna unplug this connector. Okay, you're good. You can see that. I hope. I'll kind of hold you there with my leg, the leg cam. And here goes the connector. Almost. Look at that. Unplugged. Way up there. Look at that. That is unbelievable. That is something else. So, I don't know if I want to pull the clock and see if I can figure out why it's shorting in there. That is just crazy to me. So maybe I'll pull the clock, and maybe I'll use that as Ivan says, some bonus footage. I am not done with this van. I am done with it for the night, but we have a few other issues. I've got the back passenger door, the door light kind of intermittently comes on and off, so that's going to be a whole nother adventure. I've still got to put all this back together. I probably won't bring you along for that because it's just so much stuff. There's just trim pieces everywhere. So anyway, thank you for watching this far, and I will update you when we get to the next part. I am so glad to finally figure out what it is. Thanks for watching. Okay, so this video is going to be to talk about exactly what was going on with my voltage issue that I had on my circuits. So I started off and I needed some diagrams, and I couldn't find them through All Data DIY, which is what I use because I don't work enough on cars to justify the regular All Data pricing yet, but I'm sure I will in the future. So that being said, I reached out to Ivan from Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics, and he hooked me up with some awesome diagrams, which I'm super thankful for. Turns out it does have the vehicle, and I was able to find it, which was awesome. It just took me a little digging, and so we'll start with the diagrams that Ivan sent me, and we were having that extra voltage on the stereo, keeping it on, right? So if we go over here to electrical diagrams, I'm going to click on this, and we're going to do power source right here. And here's the first diagram that I started looking at when Ivan sent me the documents. So we've got our battery coming in up here, and that comes around, and through fuses it feeds our ignition switch right here. And let's see if I can zoom in on this for you. It feeds our ignition switch right here, and I was looking at this accessory line, this blue with red wire that comes down, feeds our 7.5 amp radio and our 15 amp cigarette that goes to ground. So we don't need the rest of this diagram right now. So I initially found the voltage on both of these and wanted to find this I111. Well, after about 45 minutes of digging, I discovered that I couldn't find I111 because it doesn't exist anywhere else on ALLDATA. Okay, so after not finding what I needed here, I decided to start looking up some other diagrams, and I've got them pulled up here. And what I did was, after discovering which side of the fuse the voltage was on, I figured out it was back feeding instead of being something being left on this blue with red wire. So I followed this down to this fuse here. I pulled both of these fuses and figured out that from here onward to the rest of everything else is where that voltage was sitting. So I went through and I pulled every diagram that I could find. So here's one. This is for the mirrors. So we have our 15 amp cigarette lighter fuse that comes down into this J4 junction, which goes into this connector BJ1, which then goes into all of this stuff. So I thought, okay, well, I can find this J4 junction. Well, I had a really hard time finding this. And if you look at, here's one diagram. We've got BK1, BK2, we've got BJ1. I thought, okay, well, maybe that's J4. Maybe there's a BJ4. Nope. So that's not there. It's not here. I was just super frustrated. And so I went through and I found all these diagrams. So I went through here and I found this one. I thought, okay, so this controls the mirrors. We need to have that. This one here, which controls a couple things. So here's J1, this is junction 1. Here's that cigarette fuse, that cigarette lighter fuse that comes down, feeds part of the clock for the turn on. It also feeds the cigarette lighter. And here's J1 again, and then it goes to ground. So it also feeds here, we have our cigarette lighter fuse here, it also feeds some sort of airbag backup power supply, which is what this says here. And I wasn't too worried about that. There were no issues with that fuse out, so I wasn't worried about that, so I'm going to close that. So I started looking for these J connectors, and in the process found BJ1 and BJ2, and I thought, well, that looks familiar. Well, right here we have BJ1, this BJ1 connector, right here. And so I found that connector and I thought, okay, so here's the door flex. I can follow that in because the mirror connector is in the door, and I could find the voltage on that connector. And so I can follow that in. So I got to this connector, or what I thought was this connector. I unplugged it. It went away. Turns out the connector I found isn't actually BJ1. The connector I found is ID1. And ID1, according to this diagram, goes up and feeds something else. So when I unplugged this, the draw went away. Well, what happens is it comes around here to the fuse, right? It comes in here, but then it also comes out and through the door flex. So when I unplugged this, it was cutting that voltage, but the reason it was doing that is because this goes up and feeds the clock. And the clock was the culprit. So what happens is this 15 amp dome fuse feeds the clock here. And so this is full-time battery positive at all times. And so when this comes in, this tells the clock to turn on. Well, inside this clock mechanism, it's shorted out, and it is now shorting half of a volt, or 0.67 volts, to back feeding through this circuit into our cigarette lighter fuse and our stereo fuse. So I unplugged the clock. It definitely needs a new clock. I'm probably not going to order one. It didn't work anyway, and it's an old car. So I'm just going to let it go, and I'll probably use some of these screencasts up on the screen for the video, and just kind of wanted to give you an update. All right, everybody, that's it for part 2. We have a part 3 coming. We're going to be dealing with the belts, and we're going to do an interior detail, and then it's going to be gone. It'll hit the road. So I appreciate your views. Go ahead and subscribe if you like the content, and you'll hear from me soon. Thanks. I am calling that a fix. I'm pushing on that thing pretty hard. Oh, see it? There it went. Okay, so not in the clear yet.